The massive chamber of the Galactic Defense Council stretched across several kilometers, its crystal walls reflecting the light of 1,000 different stars. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated areas, each section designed to accommodate their unique biological needs. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert the dozens of languages being spoken into something everyone could understand. Commander Zethkar of the Veltari stood at the center podium, his tall, elegant form casting long shadows across the polished floor. His skin had a metallic blue sheen that marked him as one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. The Veltari had mastered energy manipulation centuries before most species had even discovered fire. Behind him, a massive holographic display showed various weapon systems from across known space. "Today we welcome our newest members to the Defense Council," Zethkar announced, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic design. "The species known as humans." He paused slightly as if the word left an unpleasant taste in his mouth. From the third planet of the Sol system, a small section near the back of the chamber lit up, revealing the human delegation. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood up slowly, her simple military uniform looking plain compared to the elaborate clothing and biomodifications of the other species around her. She was young by human standards, perhaps 30 years old, with short black hair and steady brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. "Thank you for accepting us into the council," Chen said, her voice clear and confident despite being surrounded by beings who could each destroy her planet with their technology. "We look forward to contributing to the defense of the galaxy." Several species made sounds that the translation devices interpreted as polite agreement, but Chen could see the doubt in their alien features. She had expected this reaction. Humans were newcomers to galactic society, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. Most of these species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Zethkar activated the holographic display, showing a detailed breakdown of human military technology. The first image showed a simple bullet being fired from a rifle. "The humans," he began, "rely primarily on what they call kinetic weapons. They accelerate small pieces of metal using chemical explosives." A ripple of what could only be described as amusement passed through the chamber. The Kethmori delegation, a species that looked like walking crystals, actually made a sound that translated as laughter. Even the usually serious Drakmari shifted in their seats, their reptilian features showing clear signs of entertainment. "This is their primary infantry weapon," Zethkar continued, highlighting the rifle. "It has an effective range of approximately 1 kilometer and requires the user to manually aim and fire each shot." More laughter echoed through the chamber. The Veltari commander's expression remained neutral, but Chen could see the satisfaction in his eyes. He was enjoying this presentation. The display changed to show human missiles and artillery. For larger targets, they use these devices, Zethkar explained. Explosive chemicals contained in metal shells. The targeting systems require direct line of sight or simple guidance computers. Representative Quillnecks of the Photonic Collective raised one of her light-based appendages. "Commander, surely these weapons are not their current technology. Perhaps they are showing us historical examples." "No," Zethkar replied with what might have been a smile on his alien features. "These are their most advanced military systems as of their inclusion in the council." The chamber erupted in more laughter. Chen felt her jaw tighten, but she remained standing calmly. Dr. Marcus Webb, the chief scientist in her delegation, leaned forward and whispered something in her ear, but she shook her head slightly. "But perhaps the most interesting example of human military thinking is this," Zethkar said, clearly saving the best for last. The holographic display now showed a crossbow, complete with wooden stock and metal string. "This is what humans call a crossbow. It fires a pointed stick using stored mechanical energy." The laughter in the chamber was no longer polite. Even species that normally maintained strict diplomatic protocols were openly expressing their amusement. The Zephyrian representative, a being made of flowing gases, pulsed with colors that translated as uncontrolled mirth. "The crossbow," Zethkar continued over the noise, "represents technology that is approximately 2,000 years old by human standards. Yet they still consider it a viable weapon system." "Excuse me," Chen said loudly, her voice cutting through the laughter. The chamber gradually quieted as she stepped forward. If I may address the council? Zethkar gestured for her to continue, though his expression suggested he was looking forward to more entertainment. The crossbow is indeed an old design, Chen began, walking closer to the holographic display. But age doesn't always mean ineffective. Sometimes the simple solutions work best. Lieutenant, interrupted Commander Vexhall of the Quantum Empire, his multiple eyes focusing on her with what looked like pity. We appreciate your enthusiasm. But surely you understand that energy weapons, plasma cannons, and quantum disruptors represent significant advances over throwing pointed sticks? The chamber murmured agreement. Chen looked around at the assembled representatives, seeing the mixture of amusement and condescension in their alien features. I understand that your weapons are very advanced, she replied carefully, but effectiveness isn't always about complexity. Zethkar stepped forward again, clearly ready to move the presentation along. Let us compare human weapons to current galactic standards, he said. The display shifted to show Veltari plasma rifles that could vaporize targets from 10 kilometers away, Drakmari energy shields that could deflect any known projectile, and Kethmori resonance weapons that could shatter molecular bonds. These weapons operate on principles your species has not yet discovered, Zethkar explained. Energy manipulation at the quantum level, plasma containment using magnetic fields, gravitational lensing for targeting systems. Each new weapon system drew appreciative sounds from the various species. Chen had to admit they were impressive. Some of them seemed to bend the laws of physics as humans understood them. Given the limitations of human technology, Zethkar concluded, the Council recommends assigning human forces to support roles only. Logistics, transport, communications, areas where their simpler technology will not be a disadvantage. The vote was swift and unanimous. 46 species voted to give humans support roles only in any military operations. Chen was the only one who abstained. The Council also wishes to inform all members, Zethkar added as the session began to close, that our intelligence services have detected increased activity from the Devourers in the Outer Rim territories. All species should prepare their defense forces. A chill passed through the chamber at the mention of the Devourers. Chen had read the reports about them during the journey to the Council meeting. An insectoid hive mind that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty rock behind. They had already destroyed 17 star systems, and their bioships seemed to adapt to every weapon used against them. As the session ended and the various delegations began filing out, several representatives approached Chen. Most offered polite but clearly insincere encouragement about humanity's role in the Council. A few made comments about how every species had to start somewhere. Chen listened politely to each of them, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about Dr. Webb's whispered words during Zethkar's presentation. Let them laugh now. We'll see who's laughing when the shooting starts. As the human delegation made their way back to their transport ship, Chen looked back at the massive council chamber one last time. The other species were already discussing deployment strategies and weapon configurations for the coming conflict with the Devourers. None of them had bothered to ask what the humans might bring to the fight beyond simple logistics support. That, Chen thought, might turn out to be their first mistake. The human research station orbited quietly around Jupiter's moon Europa, its modular design looking crude compared to the flowing organic shapes of alien spacecraft that occasionally passed through the Sol system. Inside the main laboratory, Dr. Marcus Webb hunched over his workbench, surrounded by pieces of metal, electronic components, and what looked like the remains of several crossbows. Lieutenant Sarah Chen entered the lab carrying 2 cups of coffee, setting one down next to Webb's elbow. The scientist barely acknowledged her presence, too focused on the device taking shape under his hands. Marcus, Chen said, settling into a chair across from him. It's been 3 weeks since the council meeting. Maybe it's time to let this go. Webb looked up for the first time in hours, his gray hair sticking up at odd angles and his glasses slightly crooked. Let it go? He repeated, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. Sarah, did you see how they laughed at us? At the crossbow specifically. I was there, Chen reminded him gently. And yes, it was embarrassing. But they have a point about their weapons being more advanced. More advanced, Webb muttered, turning back to his work. More complicated, you mean? More ways for things to go wrong. Chen watched as he carefully aligned a series of electromagnetic coils inside what was clearly the frame of a crossbow. The wooden stock had been replaced with a lightweight polymer composite, and the simple string mechanism had been upgraded with precision servo motors. But it was still recognizably a crossbow. "What exactly are you building?" she asked. Webb's eyes lit up behind his glasses. "I'm proving a point," he said, picking up one of the projectiles he had been working on. It looked like a crossbow bolt, but the metal gleamed with an unusual sheen, and tiny electronics were embedded along its length. "The aliens think our weapons are primitive because they're simple," Webb continued, weighing the bolt in his hand. "They don't understand that simple doesn't mean ineffective. A crossbow works because it follows basic physical principles. Store energy, release energy, transfer energy to projectile. Nothing complicated to break down or malfunction. But their plasma weapons can vaporize targets from kilometers away," Chen pointed out. "And what happens when their plasma containment fails? Or when their targeting computer gets confused? Or when the enemy adapts to their energy frequency?" Webb set the bolt down carefully. "Their weapons are impressive, but they're also vulnerable." Chen leaned forward to examine the bolt more closely. "What makes this one special?" Webb grinned, looking more excited than she had seen him since before the council meeting. "Electromagnetic rail acceleration," he said. "The crossbow mechanism is just the launch platform. These coils accelerate the bolt using the same principles as a railgun." "A railgun bolt fired from a crossbow?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "That seems like mixing technologies unnecessarily." "Think about it," Webb said, standing up and beginning to pace around the lab. "The aliens expect energy weapons. They've built their defenses around energy weapons. Their adaptive armor is designed to counter energy weapons. But a physical projectile moving at significant velocity, that's just basic physics." Chen picked up the bolt, surprised by its weight. "How fast are we talking about?" "Initial tests suggest we can achieve roughly 30% of light speed," Webb said casually, as if he were discussing the weather. Chen nearly dropped the bolt. 30% of light speed? "Marcus, that's relativistic," Webb finished. "Yes, at that velocity, the kinetic energy alone would be devastating. But I've also included a microfusion warhead in each bolt, along with adaptive targeting AI. You've created a smart bullet that travels at near light speed and carries a nuclear warhead," Chen said slowly, "and you're launching it from a crossbow." "Technically, it's a crossbow railgun hybrid," Webb corrected. "But yes, that's the basic idea." Chen set the bolt down very carefully. "Have you tested this?" "Computer simulations only," Webb admitted. "I wanted to run it past you first. After all, you'll be the one presenting it to command." Before Chen could respond, the lab's communication system activated. The holographic display showed the face of Admiral Rodriguez, commander of Earth's Defense Forces. "Lieutenant Chen, Dr. Webb," the Admiral said, his expression grim. "We've received an emergency communication from the Galactic Defense Council. The Devourers have accelerated their advance. They've consumed 3 more systems in the past week." Chen felt a chill run down her spine. "What's the Council's response, sir?" "They're mobilizing everything they have," Rodriguez replied. "Energy weapons, plasma cannons, quantum disruptors. The works. They're confident their superior technology will stop the Devourers." "And our role?" Chen asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Same as before. Support only. They want us to handle logistics and communications, while the real military forces engage the enemy." The Admiral's tone made it clear what he thought of that assignment. Webb stepped into view of the communication pickup. "Admiral, with respect, I think we might have something more substantial to contribute." Rodriguez looked interested. "What do you have in mind, Doctor?" Webb gestured to the modified crossbow on his workbench. "I've been working on some improvements to our weapon systems. Something that might surprise our alien allies." "Is it ready for field testing?" the Admiral asked. "Give me another week," Webb said. "I need to run some live fire tests and work out the targeting algorithms." "You have 3 days," Rodriguez said firmly. "The Council is deploying to the Kepler 442 system to make their stand against the Devourers. If we're going to prove that humans deserve a place in this fight, that's where we'll do it." The communication ended, leaving Chen and Webb alone in the lab. Chen looked around at the scattered components and half-finished devices that filled every available surface. 3 days, she said. "Can you really have this ready in 3 days?" Webb was already moving, gathering components and tools. "I'll need help," he said. "And I'll need the entire engineering team working around the clock." You'll have it, Chen promised. But Marcus, are you sure about this? If it doesn't work, we'll be no worse off than we are now, Webb replied. The aliens already think we're useless. But if it does work? Chen nodded, understanding what he left unsaid. If the modified crossbow worked, it would prove that human ingenuity could compete with alien technology. More importantly, it might give them the edge they needed against the Devourers. Over the next 3 days, the research station became a hive of activity. Engineers worked in shifts, fabricating components and testing systems. The station's small manufacturing bay ran continuously, producing electromagnetic coils targeting computers and the specialized ammunition Webb had designed. The crossbow itself evolved rapidly under the pressure of the deadline. The final version looked like something from a science fiction movie crossed with a medieval weapon. The basic crossbow frame was unmistakable, but it was surrounded by glowing coils, compact computers, and energy storage systems. It's not pretty, Webb admitted as he ran the final calibration tests. But it works. Chen watched the test results scroll across the computer screen. The projectile velocities were everything Webb had promised. The targeting system could track and engage multiple targets simultaneously. The fusion warheads had enough destructive power to eliminate small spacecraft. The aliens are going to think we've lost our minds, she said. Let them think that, Webb replied, carefully packing the crossbow into its transport case. Sometimes the crazy solutions are the ones that work. As the human task force prepared to depart for the Kepler 442 system, Chen found herself thinking about the expressions on the alien representatives' faces during the council meeting. Their laughter, their condescension, their absolute certainty that human weapons were primitive and useless. Soon, she thought, they would find out just how wrong they were. The Kepler 442 system had once been home to a thriving colony of peaceful traders. Now it was the chosen battlefield where the galaxy would make its stand against the Devourers. The combined fleet of the Galactic Defense Council spread across space in a formation that stretched for millions of kilometers, representing the military might of 47 different species. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Veltari Dreadnought Luminous Victory, watching the tactical displays with growing confidence. Around him, his crew operated the most advanced weapon systems in known space, plasma cannons that could punch through any known armor, energy shields that could deflect entire asteroid impacts, and quantum disruptors that could tear apart matter at the molecular level. Fleet status report, Zethkar commanded. All ships in position. Commander, his tactical officer replied. Veltari 3rd Fleet reports ready. Drakmari assault squadrons are in formation. Kethmori resonance ships have achieved harmonic lock. Zethkar nodded with satisfaction. Every weapon system had been tested and proven effective against various targets. The Devourers might be adaptive, but surely they could not evolve fast enough to counter the combined technological might of the galaxy's most advanced species. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving a request from the human support fleet. They're asking permission to join the battle formation. Zethkar's expression shifted to mild annoyance. The humans had arrived 3 days ago with a small fleet of their primitive vessels. He had assigned them to rearguard duties, keeping them well away from the actual fighting where their simple weapons wouldn't be a liability. Remind the humans that their role is support only, Zethkar said. They are to maintain position behind the main battle line and assist with communications and logistics. They're insisting they have new weapon systems to contribute. Sir, Zethkar made a sound that didn't translate well but conveyed his skepticism. New weapons? Their most advanced technology is barely beyond chemical explosives. Tell them to maintain their assigned position. On the human command ship, Lieutenant Sarah Chen received Zethkar's message with a mixture of frustration and determination. Dr. Webb stood beside her on the bridge, the modified crossbow secured in a specially designed mounting system nearby. They still don't want us in the fight, Chen reported to her crew. Their loss, Webb muttered, checking the readouts on his weapon system one more time. Let them see what their energy weapons accomplish first. The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of living nightmares. Their bioships defied conventional understanding of spacecraft design, looking more like massive insects or deep-sea creatures than anything built by intelligent beings. Some were the size of cities, their surfaces crawling with organic weapon systems and adaptive armor. All ships engage, Zethkar commanded. The combined fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma beams lanced across space. Quantum disruptors sent ripples through reality itself, and energy weapons of every description lit up the darkness between the stars. For a moment, it looked like the aliens' confidence was justified. Several Devourer bioships were destroyed in the opening barrage, their organic hulls unable to withstand the concentrated firepower. But then the adaptation began. Chen watched from her position at the rear of the formation as the Devourer ships started to change. Their bio-armor shifted colors and textures, developing new configurations that seemed specifically designed to counter the energy weapons being used against them. Plasma beams that had been devastating moments before now barely scorched their targets. Quantum disruptors found their effects neutralized by rapidly evolving defensive systems. "Sir," the human tactical officer reported, "the alien fleet is taking heavy casualties. The Devourers are adapting faster than expected." Chen could see it happening on the tactical display. Veltari ships that had seemed invincible were being overrun by Devourer boarding pods. Drakmari assault squadrons found their weapons increasingly ineffective. As the enemy bioships developed immunity to their attacks, Commander Zethkar is requesting assistance, the communications officer announced. His flagship is under attack. Chen looked at the display showing the luminous victory. The massive dreadnought was surrounded by smaller Devourer vessels, their bioweapons tearing through its energy shields like they were paper. Zethkar's plasma cannons were firing continuously, but the shots were barely leaving marks on the attacking ships. "Ma'am," the tactical officer said quietly, "the alien fleet is collapsing. At this rate, they'll be completely overrun within the hour." Chen looked at Webb, who was standing ready beside his crossbow system. "Are you sure this will work?" "Only one way to find out," Webb replied, his hands moving over the targeting controls. "But Sarah, if we're going to do this, we need to get closer. A lot closer." Chen made her decision. "Helm, take us into the battle zone." "Full speed." "Ma'am, that's against our orders," the helmsman pointed out. "Our orders were to provide support," Chen said firmly. "This is support." The human ships accelerated toward the chaotic battle, their simple fusion drives pushing them into the heart of the conflict. Around them, alien vessels were fighting for their lives against an enemy that seemed to counter every weapon they used. "Human fleet, what are you doing?" Zethkar's voice crackled over the communication system. "Return to your assigned position immediately." "Negative, Commander," Chen replied. "We're coming to assist." "With what?" "Your primitive weapons are useless against the Devourers." Chen didn't answer immediately. She was watching Webb make final adjustments to the crossbow's targeting system, the ancient weapon looking absurdly out of place among the high-tech displays of the ship's bridge. "Target acquired," Webb announced. "Devourer bioship, approximately 50,000 kilometers off our starboard bow." Chen looked at the tactical display. The target was one of the larger bioships currently in the process of consuming a disabled Kethmori vessel. Its bioarmor was shifting and adapting continuously, having already developed immunity to 3 different types of energy weapons. "Sir," the weapons officer said uncertainly, "are we really going to fire a crossbow at that thing?" "Not just any crossbow," Webb corrected, his finger hovering over the firing control. "Ready, Lieutenant?" Chen took a deep breath. Everything they had worked for, everything humanity hoped to prove came down to this moment. Around them, the most advanced military technology in the galaxy was failing against an enemy that could adapt to anything. Except, perhaps to something so simple that adaptation wasn't possible. "Fire," Chen ordered. Webb pressed the firing control. The crossbow mechanism engaged with a sound that was somehow both ancient and futuristic. Mechanical springs working in harmony with electromagnetic coils. The bolt shot forward, accelerated by forces that combined medieval engineering with cutting-edge physics. For a brief moment, nothing seemed to happen. The bolt was too small and moving too fast to be visible against the backdrop of space. Then it struck its target. The Devourer bioship didn't just explode. It simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the kinetic energy of a projectile moving at 30% of light speed. The fusion warhead detonated microseconds later, creating a brief star that incinerated 3 nearby enemy vessels and sent shockwaves through the Devourer formation. The sudden silence on the communication channels was deafening. Every ship in both fleets had stopped firing, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Webb was already loading another bolt. "Target the big one," he said calmly, as if he had just swatted a fly instead of destroying a ship the size of a small moon. Chen found her voice. "All human ships engage at will. Show them what we can do." The human fleet opened fire with their primitive weapons, railgun slugs moving at relativistic speeds, guided missiles with nuclear warheads, and kinetic bombardment systems that relied on simple physics rather than complex energy manipulation. The Devourers, evolved to counter energy weapons, had no defense against projectiles that hit with the force of small asteroids. For the first time since their expansion began, the Devourers found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't adapt to. How do you evolve armor against a chunk of metal moving at significant fractions of light speed? How do you counter explosions that follow the basic laws of nuclear physics? The answer, it turned out, was that you couldn't. As the human weapons tore through the Devourer fleet, Chen opened a channel to the alien ships. "This is Lieutenant Chen to all Council vessels. I believe we've found something your energy adaptation can't handle." The response from Zethkar came after a long pause. What kind of weapon was that?" Chen looked at Webb, who was grinning as he loaded another bolt into his crossbow. "Just a simple kinetic projectile, Commander. Nothing complicated." "Impossible. No kinetic weapon could achieve that level of destruction." "Commander," Chen said patiently, "would you like us to explain the physics involved? Or would you prefer we continue eliminating the Devourer fleet?" Another pause. Then in a much quieter voice, "Continue firing, Lieutenant. We'll discuss the technical details later." As the human ships continued their devastating assault on the Devourers, Chen allowed herself a small smile. The aliens had called their weapons crude and primitive. They were about to learn that sometimes the simplest solution. The space around the Kepler 442 system had become a graveyard of bioships, their organic hulls drifting lifeless among the debris of what had once been the most feared fleet in the galaxy. Dr. Marcus Webb stood at his crossbow station, methodically loading another rail-accelerated bolt, while the targeting computer identified the next Devourer vessel in the chaotic battle. "Target acquired," Webb announced, his voice steady despite the magnitude of destruction they were unleashing. "Devourer command ship, range 120,000 kilometers." Lieutenant Sarah Chen watched the tactical display as Webb's crossbow bolt streaked across space, its passage creating a visible distortion in the fabric of space-time itself. The bolt moved so fast that the ship's sensors could barely track it, a tiny projectile carrying the kinetic energy of a small asteroid and the explosive power of a fusion bomb. The Devourer command ship, a massive bioconstruct the size of a small city, had been coordinating the enemy fleet's adaptive responses. Its bioarmor had successfully evolved to deflect or absorb every energy weapon the Galactic fleet had thrown at it. Plasma beams, quantum disruptors, particle cannons, all had proven useless against its adaptive defenses. The crossbow bolt hit it dead center. The command ship didn't explode so much as it unraveled, its molecular structure unable to cope with the sudden transfer of relativistic kinetic energy. The fusion warhead detonated milliseconds later, creating a brief artificial sun that illuminated the entire battlefield. When the light faded, nothing remained but an expanding cloud of superheated gas and the shocked silence of every ship in the system. "Jesus," whispered the human tactical officer. "We just killed their flagship with a crossbow." Commander Zethkar's voice crackled over the communication channel, no longer carrying its previous tone of condescension. "Human vessels, this is Zethkar. How are you doing this?" Chen looked at Webb, who was already preparing another shot. The scientist had barely slept in the past week, driven by a mixture of determination and righteous anger at the galactic community's dismissal of human ingenuity. "It's simple physics, Commander," Chen replied. "Mass times velocity squared. We're just applying it more effectively than you expected. But the energy requirements alone..." Zethkar's voice trailed off as another human ship fired its railgun, sending a tungsten slug through 3 Devourer vessels in a single shot. Webb looked up from his targeting system, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Commander, may I ask what your plasma cannon's maximum effective velocity is?" There was a pause before Zethkar responded. "Approximately 15% of light speed for our most advanced systems." "And how much energy do you expend containing and directing the plasma?" "Each shot requires the equivalent of our ship's entire reactor output for approximately 30 seconds, Zethkar admitted. Webb nodded as if this confirmed something he had suspected. We're achieving twice your velocity with a fraction of the energy cost. The crossbow mechanism stores energy mechanically. The rail system accelerates the projectile electromagnetically, and the projectile itself carries its own warhead. Simple, efficient, effective. Chen watched as the remaining Devourer ships began to change their tactics. Unable to adapt their bioarmor to kinetic weapons moving at relativistic speeds, they were attempting to swarm the human vessels with smaller attack craft. It was a desperate strategy that revealed just how thoroughly their adaptive advantages had been neutralized. All human ships, Chen commanded, switch to point defense mode. Let's show them what our primitive rapid-fire systems can do. The human fleet opened up with automated defense systems that the aliens had dismissed as crude during the initial weapons review. Gatling guns that fired depleted uranium rounds at thousands of rounds per minute, missile defense systems with multiple independent targeting, and close-in weapon systems that could track and destroy incoming projectiles with computer-assisted precision. The Devourer attack craft, evolved to counter energy-based point defenses, found themselves shredded by streams of physical projectiles that their bioarmor couldn't deflect. Small explosions lit up space around the human ships as the automated systems methodically destroyed everything that came within range. Incredible, came a new voice over the communication channel. Representative Quillnex of the Photonic Collective sounded stunned. Your defensive systems are achieving 97% kill ratios against the attack craft. Our energy-based defenses were only managing 30% before the Devourers adapted. Bullets don't care about adaptation, Webb said simply, loading another bolt into his crossbow. Physics is physics. Chen could see the larger picture developing on the tactical display. The Devourer fleet, which had seemed unstoppable just hours ago, was in full retreat. For the first time in their recorded expansion across the galaxy, they had encountered weapons they couldn't evolve to counter. How do you adapt to a chunk of metal moving at significant fractions of light speed? How do you evolve defenses against explosions that follow basic nuclear physics? The answer was becoming increasingly clear. You couldn't. Lieutenant Chen, Zethkar's voice had taken on a completely different tone. Gone was the condescension and barely concealed amusement. We owe you an apology. Your species' contribution to this battle has been significant. Thank you, Commander, Chen replied diplomatically, though she couldn't entirely keep the satisfaction out of her voice. We're just glad we could help. Dr. Webb fired another shot, this one targeting a Devourer bioship that was attempting to escape the system. The bolt caught it as it tried to enter hyperspace, the resulting explosion creating a brief rift in space-time itself, before collapsing harmlessly. The science behind your weapons, came another voice. Dr. Kethmanul of the Crystalline Hegemony. It's so straightforward. We've been so focused on exotic matter manipulation and quantum effects that we forgot about basic kinetic energy transfer. Sometimes the old ways work because they're based on fundamentals that never change, Webb said, his voice carrying over the communication channel. Gravity, inertia, conservation of energy. These aren't suggestions. They're laws. Chen watched as the last major Devourer vessel attempted to flee the system. The human fleet had spread out to prevent any escapes, their primitive ships now coordinating the entire battle, while the alien vessels provided support fire with what few effective weapons they had left. All ships, this is Chen, she announced. Let's finish this. The final phase of the battle was almost anticlimactic. The remaining Devourer ships, unable to adapt and unable to escape, were systematically destroyed by human kinetic weapons. Some tried to surrender using biochemical signals that the translation computers barely recognized, but Chen knew from the intelligence reports that the Devourers had never shown mercy to any species they encountered. No quarter, she ordered. They destroyed 17 systems. Every ship is a threat until it's dead. When the last Devourer vessel was finally destroyed, an unusual silence fell over the communication channels. The combined fleet had achieved what many had thought impossible. They had stopped the Devourer's advance and eliminated an entire fleet of the galaxy's most feared enemy. Fleet casualties report, Chen requested. Alien fleet casualties are severe, her tactical officer reported. Approximately 60% losses. Human fleet casualties are minimal. 3 ships with minor damage, no losses. Chen nodded, though the numbers were sobering. The Galactic Fleet had paid a heavy price for their initial overconfidence, while the humans had emerged almost unscathed due to their effective weapons and the enemy's inability to adapt to kinetic attacks. "Lieutenant?" Zethkar's voice came over the channel one more time. "Permission to come aboard your vessel? I believe we need to discuss your weapons technology in much greater detail." Chen looked at Webb, who was carefully securing his crossbow system. The scientist looked tired but satisfied, like an artist who had just completed his masterpiece. "Permission granted, Commander," Chen replied. Dr. Webb would be happy to explain the technical specifications. As the alien ships began moving toward the human fleet, Chen realized that everything had changed. The galaxy had seen what human ingenuity could accomplish when properly applied. They had proven that effectiveness didn't require complexity, that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most devastating. The Devourers, for the first time in their expansion, had been forced to retreat, and they had been defeated not by exotic energy weapons or quantum manipulation, but by the same basic principles that had driven human warfare for thousands of years: kinetic energy, explosive force, and the simple physics of mass and motion. Webb looked up from his equipment with a tired smile. "You know what the best part is, Sarah?" "What's that, Marcus?" "They called it a crude weapon. But crude weapons don't care about being sophisticated. They just care about working." Chen smiled back, watching as the alien vessels approached to learn about the primitive technology that had just saved the galaxy. Sometimes, she thought, the simplest truths were the most powerful ones, unworthy. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, the Galactic Defense Council chambers looked very different. The same crystal walls reflected the same starlight, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where once there had been condescending laughter and barely concealed amusement, now there was respectful attention as Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at the central podium. Commander Zethkar sat in the front row of the Veltari delegation, his metallic blue skin somehow seeming less arrogant than before. Beside him, representatives from dozens of species listened intently as Chen explained the principles behind human kinetic warfare. The holographic display showed not plasma cannons or quantum disruptors, but simple diagrams of velocity, mass, and energy transfer. "The key to understanding human weapons technology," Chen was saying, "is recognizing that we never forgot the basics. While other species developed increasingly complex energy systems, we continued to perfect the fundamental principles of kinetic warfare." Dr. Marcus Webb stood near the back of the chamber, holding his modified crossbow with obvious pride. The weapon had become something of a celebrity since the battle, with alien scientists requesting detailed scans and blueprints. Webb had been happy to oblige, though he insisted on explaining the underlying physics to anyone who wanted to understand how it worked. "But surely," interrupted Representative Quill Nex, "such simple principles cannot compete with advanced energy manipulation?" Chen smiled, the same expression she had worn during their first presentation to the Council. "With respect, Representative, I believe the battle results speak for themselves. Human kinetic weapons achieved a kill ratio of approximately 400 to 1 against Devourer bioships. The combined energy weapons of the Galactic Fleet managed roughly 1 to 3 before the Devourers adapted." The chamber murmured with what the translation devices identified as impressed acknowledgement. Even the usually skeptical Drakmari delegation nodded their reptilian heads in agreement. Zethkar rose from his seat, his movements carrying none of their previous arrogance. "Lieutenant Chen, on behalf of the Veltari and myself personally, I wish to formally apologize for our previous assessment of human military capabilities." "Thank you, Commander," Chen replied graciously. "But apologies aren't necessary. Scientific skepticism is healthy. What matters is that we learn to work together effectively." "Indeed," Zethkar continued, "which brings us to the primary purpose of today's session. The Council has voted unanimously to upgrade humanity's status from support roles to primary combat division. Effective immediately, the chamber erupted in sounds of approval from 46 different species. Chen felt a surge of satisfaction, not just for herself and her species, but for Dr. Webb and every human engineer who had been dismissed as primitive by more advanced civilizations. Furthermore, Zethkar continued, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the positive reactions, the Council formally requests that human military advisors be assigned to assist in upgrading the weapon systems of all member species. This announcement created even more excitement in the chamber. Chen could see alien representatives already discussing among themselves, probably calculating how quickly they could retrofit their own ships with human-designed kinetic weapons. The Drakmari Republic, announced Commander Vexhall, has already begun converting 3 of our assault squadrons to human kinetic designs. Initial tests show a 300% increase in effective firepower. The Crystalline Hegemony has requested complete technical specifications for human railgun technology, added Dr. Kethmanal. Our crystal-based hulls are ideal for absorbing the recoil forces. Chen held up a hand for silence. Before we get too carried away with retrofitting existing ships, I think it's important to understand why human weapons work so well. The chamber quieted, alien representatives leaning forward with the kind of attention that humans had never received from the galactic community before. Our weapons work, Chen continued, not because they're more advanced, but because they're based on principles that can't be circumvented. The Devourers could adapt to energy weapons because energy can be absorbed, deflected, or dissipated. But kinetic energy follows basic physical laws. You can't evolve armor that ignores conservation of momentum. Webb stepped forward, setting his crossbow on the display table. The crossbow itself is secondary, he explained. We could have mounted these rail acceleration systems on any platform. But the crossbow represents something important about human thinking. Which is? Asked Representative Silthara of the gaseous communes. We never threw away the old knowledge, Webb said simply. Every human child learns about basic machines, levers, pulleys, springs. We build on that foundation instead of replacing it. The crossbow is a spring-powered lever system combined with electromagnetic acceleration and fusion warheads. Old knowledge enhanced by new technology. Chen nodded in agreement. Our military doctrine has always been about effectiveness over elegance. If something works, we improve it rather than replacing it entirely. The holographic display changed to show footage from the battle, focusing on the moment when Webb's first crossbow bolt destroyed the massive Devourer bioship. The chamber watched in fascination as the primitive-looking weapon delivered devastation that the galaxy's most advanced energy systems couldn't match. The fusion warhead, Webb continued, follows the same principle. Nuclear fusion isn't complex physics, it's basic chemistry accelerated by extreme conditions. The targeting AI uses simple algorithms based on predicted movement patterns. The rail acceleration system is just electromagnetic induction applied to projectile propulsion. Simple components working together efficiently, Chen summarized. That's been the foundation of human technology since we first started making tools. Zethkar stood again, his expression thoughtful. Lieutenant Dr. Webb, I have a question that goes beyond technical specifications. Yes, Commander? How did your species maintain this focus on fundamentals while developing advanced technology? Most civilizations become so fascinated with exotic physics that they lose sight of basic principles. Webb and Chen exchanged glances. It was a good question, one they had discussed many times during the journey back from Kepler 442. I think, Chen said slowly, it's because humans have always been improvisers. Our planet forced us to adapt constantly. Climate changes, natural disasters, resource scarcity. We learned to use whatever worked, regardless of how sophisticated it looked. Also, Webb added with a slight grin, humans are naturally stubborn. When other species told us our weapons were primitive, our first instinct was to prove them wrong by making those weapons better. The chamber filled with sounds that the translation devices interpreted as laughter, but it was different from the mocking laughter that had greeted humans during their first council meeting. This was appreciative, respectful amusement. There's another factor, Chen continued. Human military history is full of examples where simple weapons defeated complex ones. We've learned not to dismiss something just because it looks basic. The session continued for several hours, with alien representatives asking detailed questions about human weapons technology, military doctrine, and engineering philosophy. Webb found himself explaining everything from basic ballistics to advanced materials science, while Chen discussed tactical applications and strategic thinking. As the formal session ended, representatives from various species approached the human delegation with requests for cooperation, technical exchanges, and joint development projects. The transformation was remarkable. Humans had gone from being dismissed as primitive to being sought after as military advisors. Lieutenant Chen, Zethkar said as the chamber began to empty, I have one final request. Yes, Commander? Would you be willing to address the Veltari Military Academy? Our officers need to understand that technological advancement isn't always about complexity. Chen smiled. I'd be honored, Commander. But I think Dr. Webb should come too. He can bring the crossbow. Zethkar looked at the weapon with something approaching reverence. Yes, I think that would be very educational for our cadets. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Webb carefully packed his crossbow back into its transport case. The weapon that had been mocked as a primitive relic was now recognized as a symbol of human ingenuity and tactical thinking. You know what I find ironic? Webb said to Chen as they walked toward the exit. What's that? They called our weapons crude, but their energy systems are actually more primitive than our kinetic weapons. Energy dissipation, plasma containment, quantum field manipulation, those are all just different ways of moving energy around. But kinetic weapons create energy by converting mass and velocity directly into destructive force. It's actually more elegant, Chen laughed. Don't let them hear you say that, Marcus. You'll give them an inferiority complex. As they left the council chambers, Chen reflected on how much had changed since their first presentation. Humans were no longer the primitive newcomers begging for acceptance into galactic society. They were respected partners whose simple, effective approach to warfare had not only stopped the Devourers but revolutionized military thinking across the galaxy.